What aspect of a child's brain does education really cater to?
Our definition of education needs to be largely redefined. I don't think parenting needs to be gentle. I believe parenting needs to be responsive. Gently raised children, intelligently raised children are the ones you will see that are the change makers. These are children from very young who've been exposed to secure, safe homes that have nurtured the spiritual aspects along with everything, all of the physical and social needs.
What are the different parenting styles or attachment styles?
There is secure attachment, insecure attachment, avoidant attachment, and there is disorganized attachment. Different styles of parenting, which is basically like permissive parenting, authoritarian parenting, and authoritative parenting. Hey, I'm going to give you the space. Here is your boundary. The minute you step out of the boundary, I'm going to be there to shove you back in, and I'm going to be there to draw those lines. So that idea of clear-cut boundaries and being responsive to your child's needs. It's okay for parents to be angry. Our life stresses are many. On top of this, we are trying to do our best for our children. And who better than a parent that wants nothing but the best for their child? I think this whole idea of calm and anger not being villainized is a very Western concept. I truly believe, at least in the Indic wisdom, every emotion has a very valid place, including anger and rage. The more human vulnerabilities you're able to show to your child is them picking up cues from your...
What is helicopter parenting?
Completely out of love, because it plays with the self-esteem of the child.
Because you don't allow the child to learn.
Yeah, and where does resilience come from? If you don't struggle, if you don't fail, if you don't try again. You're not giving that opportunity to the child.
What happens when either of the parent thinks very differently? Then how do they meet the middle path for the child?
So we've seen academics decline when a child comes from a confused household. We believe education begins at home. We continue it at school, and then it comes back, and it's a cycle at home as well.
Today I see a lot of kids can't accept failure. Why do you think that happens?
Sadly, it all comes back to the house. We have seen birthday parties where children are taking part and the parents behind are saying, go faster, do it, do what it takes, push it. And it's a party for children, by the children, and if the agenda of competition is being pushed so heavily from the house, the child comes in with that mindset of... And what is the school doing? Promoting more things like that. The child absolutely needs the primary caregiver's undivided attention. This child is sitting across, he's bad at Telugu, the other child is bad at Hindi, and he's like, oh, no problem, Mr. I'm good at Telugu, she's good at Hindi, we'll just exchange papers and we'll just help each other. But like, no. That's not how exams happen.
Me and my classmates, whether we study that subject or don't study that subject, all of us are going to go to 6th. And it was not very well taken by this adult who feels like, I have to earn that grade. So how do you look at this mindset?
You're not doing a service to your child by constantly moving them grades up. It doesn't have to be a fail. It doesn't have to be a repeat of grade.
Do you think words just matter there? I hear most parents saying that the process matters and not the result. But I feel children are a lot more intelligent. They look at the actions of the parents, and what you're talking about takes a lot of conscious parenting, lot of inner work on both the primary caregivers.
If the primary caregivers are different, where one is pushing and the other one's more accepting, you never know which side the child takes. Just to please a parent, they will be typically on the parent that's more aggressive, that's more forthcoming, that's more type A. It's human nature, right? It's dogs, it's all of us. Like the alpha strongly has a presence felt.
Very interesting and very scary.
Very scary. See, it's not possible to have a ubiquitous home where everybody is the same, and it's not good for the child either. And that's why we are big fans of joint families, because it mimics the world. Tomorrow when your child goes out, when you're preparing them in these micro-environments for those disappointments, for those hurts, what you're doing is actually giving your child the advantage of
building resilience.
Absolutely, growth.
Young children who are taking to entrepreneurial projects and participating, do you see that really nurtures them?
As long as it's not forced.
Today's episode, we discuss a topic very close to my heart, parenting. One that has enabled my own self-discovery. Joining me is someone whose work in education has touched the lives of many families, Chitra Raghunathan, lovingly known as Suchi. Chitra is a co-founder of Montessori in Hyderabad, India. A seasoned educator specializing in early childhood development, she holds a diploma from the American Montessori Society via the Princeton Center for Teacher Education and an AMI diploma from the Netherlands. As a parent, founder, and guide to many, she helps us explore the landscape of parenting styles, pedagogical approaches, and the evolving spectrum of education, from traditional schooling to homeschooling and alternative methods. So whether you're a parent, a teacher, or simply curious about how the way we raise children shapes the world, this episode promises to spark reflection and offer tools for intentional living. Welcome to Sacred Pod, where our conversations go not just to the heart of the matter, but to the soul of it. Hi, Suchi. Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation today.
Hi, Shruti. It's really a pleasure to be here. So thank you so much for inviting me.
When leaders talk about bringing a change in a country, moving a population out of poverty, the first box that gets ticked or highlighted is education. But are we really educating our children so that they can earn a living for themselves? What aspect of a child's brain does education really cater to?
I think it largely depends on our definition of education. Are we looking at education as a very passive reception of knowledge? They're teaching me something, I'm doing it, I'm ticking the answers and I'm getting graded for it. Is that education? Or is education everything that all the tools in education is social emotional, education is cognitive, education is political, right? So are we educating the child in all aspects? Are we looking at education as a, like you rightly said, a tick box to receive passive modes of instruction? Or are we looking at it as a fundamental part, like food, shelter, all of those fundamental human needs? This would be the spiritual values, right? This would fall under the spiritual needs of a child. To me, education falls under the spiritual needs of the child, because what a grandmother, while she's making that avakai pickle with you, right? While she's passing her age-old wisdom of removing the seed coat from that, and she's telling you how to carefully touch this thing so that no, it does not develop fungus or anything, is education. When the child is sitting right there, right? To this very child that goes to a school and sees another, we've had such heartwarming letters where parents have written to us that a child in an airport saw water everywhere and took pieces of paper and started cleaning it up herself, anecdotes like this. Is that not education, right? So our definition of education needs to be largely redefined. So
can you comment a little bit on what are the needs of a child and what categories do they fall into?
So the needs of a child are largely physical, of course, right? Needs to have appropriate clothing, appropriate shelter, defense from natural things, too much sunlight, too much rain, all of that. Those fall under the physical needs. Emotional needs, which is, according to me, the biggest part of the pie, the biggest part of the pizza is the emotional needs, where the caregiver understands, because I don't have a language yet and I'm referring to an infant here, right? So I don't have the language yet to be able to express to you what I need, but you're able to get it, you're able to know which cry is for what, and you're jumping in repeatedly, not just once, you're jumping in every time that I need something, you're there for me. So emotional needs. And the next one would be social needs, right? So am I giving enough opportunities for expression? Am I allowing for the optimal growth of a child would be physical, emotional, social, all put together, right? If a house can expose the child to all of this appropriately in the amounts. And this is the part that I want young parents to also know, while it seems very heavy on emotional needs in the beginning, right? The more you give it at that time, the lesser you will have to, as your child grows. This child is growing up with this sense of safety, with the sense of stability that, yes, I know that every time mama has taken me to a certain place, and this time if she's late, there must be a reason for it. Right? Yes. I'm not insecure that, oh my God, is she going to abandon me today again? Because this child's needs have been met consistently in the past. So when it seems heavy in the younger stages, but all it does is you're setting a lifetime of these needs being met and the child becoming very, very secure.
Beautiful. So we spoke about physical, emotional,
and social.
What about the spiritual needs?
Absolutely. And I think the emotional and spiritual are definitely very interconnected, because there is this heavy misconception that spiritual is ritualistic, is all of that, right? I mean, I know some beautiful atheistic family homes that have the most spiritual children, that have shown the most empathy. And it goes back to what I was saying, like if that child is growing up with a grandmother that's treating the support staff with a lot of respect, with a lot of, and that's the ethos of that home, this child, grows up into this adult that passes the same value systems along along as he or she grows up. And that to me is a very, the spiritual component of the child comes from that. Are you a decent human being? Are you able to feel the pain of not just another human, of a plant, of an animal, of anything that you're, gently raised children, emotionally, intelligently raised children are the ones you will see that are the change makers. They are the ones that will actually be doing the silent movements, the Greta Thunbergs and things like that, because these are very, very, these are children from very young who've been exposed to secure, safe homes that have nurtured the spiritual aspects along with everything, all of the physical and social needs.
It's very interesting, Suchi, but I'd also like to highlight something here. When we are talking about homes, are we always, and when we are talking about consistency from a parent, we also have to take into cognizance that that adult is also a human being. She's going to have her highs and lows.
Of course.
Some days children, like my son, he says, if I don't listen, Amma shouts at me. It might, to a new person, sound like I might be a very aggressive person, but then I tell my child, see, for 2 days, I've been asking you to clean up this. Then on the third day, I will just feel very disrespected that my boundaries are not being respected or my role as a caregiver is not being honored. So the next reaction is, because I'm not being heard, I will raise my voice.
Right.
And now he understands that.
Right.
And that's why he says, that's why I told them, because I don't listen, Amma shouts.
Right.
That's the way he puts it very intelligently. But we all know that caregiving, parenting is not always done in a gentle way. Sometimes we do have bad days, but I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, this whole idea of gentle parenting, I don't know where, honestly. I don't think parenting needs to be gentle. I believe parenting needs to be responsive. And there is a very nuanced difference there because, and precisely like you said, was there anything wrong in you at the third day after having given, being gentle enough for long enough to be able to say, hey, these are the boundaries, these are the consequences that you will have to now do, right? And these are natural consequences that if you're not going to clean up your room, I'm sorry, this is where I draw my line. I'm going to walk away from here, right? So the idea is not to be this perfect, calm. And I think this whole idea of calm and anger not being, villainized is a very Western concept. I truly believe, at least in the Indic wisdom, that we strongly, every emotion has a very valid place, including anger and rage.
Yes.
And the more humane you are to your child, the more human vulnerabilities you're able to show to your child is them picking up cues from your parenting to say that this is the adult and this is how I'm going to respond in this situation next time. Right? And your son is absolutely right. When I don't listen, my mom shouts at me, right? So that has been very clearly internalized because you've taken the time to actually have that conversation with him. You're not randomly shouting at him when you're not given him warning. It's like basically saying, you see the dirt. Okay, this is the kind of parenting that is not gentle, in my opinion, is to say that there's dirt and you're not told the child anything 1 day, 2 day, and the third day something else happens and you're triggered by that. You come home, you see this is like that final straw on the camel's back and you burst out and the child has no idea why you're bursting out. That is very different from what you just spoke about, right? And what you spoke about is absolutely, it is responsive parenting. It is something that the parent is doing in response to the child's action after having been given clear boundaries of what is expected of me. And those expectations can be formed together. Like, it is basically showing a child, how do you regulate your emotions? Okay. And this is our house. This is our shared space. These are my asks for me. And you tell me what your asks are. Okay. And we both will reach a particular a comfortable space where we both are respecting each other's needs, wants, and being able to be respectful to each other. I think that is very important.
Very beautiful. And I think that's where the joy of real relationships can be enjoyed.
Absolutely. And really, and I do want to bring something to the attention is this whole thing of like anger. It's okay for parents to be angry. Yeah. Our life stresses are many. On top of this, we are trying to do our best for our children, and who better than a parent, a caregiver that wants nothing but the best for their child, right?
Yes.
Given I think when it's coming from that space, as long as one is able to regulate their emotions and know what is a valid response for the situation, I think every emotion is valid. And I think it should all be honored.
Yes. And this is something very beautiful that my mentor also told me. Are you saying that something really wrong happens to you and you don't get angry? Then you're suppressing that emotion. It's going to come out in a different way. At the time when British came over, you had to be angry because something was being taken away from you. You can't repress in saying, no, I'm going to hold restraint.
Be calm. I'm going to be the Zen. It doesn't work that way.
Possible.
It's not possible. And it's honestly, more than saying that suppressing it, I'm saying not calling it out is actually an injustice too, right? When something wrong is happening, what message are you sending your child?
To tolerate it and you become submissive and you're a victim.
Exactly. That whole victim mindset, right?
Yes.
That is not what we want our children to see. We want
Correct.
children to see strong, capable adults who know how to regulate, and even anger can be regulated in a very regulated manner, can actually be very powerful and effective. So,
very beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
I see this very prominently in my son. He's 12 now. And he just does not budge to authoritative parenting.
Of course.
And
I'm so proud of that.
And he's been a Montessori child. He grew up with 5 years of education at a Montessori school. And I see that because he knows what his needs are. At the same time, there's enough understanding to hear the adult and to place himself in the adult's shoes, right, and be okay, right, with adjusting that little much as his needs are being, as long as he's heard and seen. Right. So that I've seen really helped my relationship with him. And I'm also proud to say that today, amongst the rest of the relationships with other adults, my relationship and connection is much more stronger with this individual here, because he's taught me how to meet him at the middle ground. And also because it's just 12 years old, I'm learning and discovering so much of my own self,
And I cannot tell you, it's really bringing tears to my eyes, because I do know your son. And it's something that I completely have seen everything that, and it's not unique to him alone, because what an environment that honors the child's needs does is it allows the child to place the faith on himself or herself, right? It tells the child, my voice is important. I'm an equal stakeholder. And at 12, he better be an equal stakeholder, right?
Yes.
And for the child to have that much clarity to say, I'm hearing you, but I don't agree with you, and so I will not do it, is exactly what a parent should want for their child. And yes. And just like you, I think for me too, I think parenting is an incredibly joyful journey. There is so many myths and these memes about parenting being so hard and all of that, and I think we make it hard by complicating things, by not understanding the very basic emotional needs of a child. And it starts young, it starts really young. And I think while the school, yes, plays an important role. That's why I said the first 3 years when the child is largely at home and primarily at home. Again, it's a question of privilege, of course, but for those children who are able to be raised at home, if they are raised in an environment of consistency, every time I cry, I want something, I'm given that, and it happens over and over and over again. It's sending a message to my brain. It's myelinating my brain to say that yes, this is a structure that I can solidly depend upon. Which is why that question, when you asked about the caregivers being different, the relationship with one caregiver tends to be stronger, and it's usually the one that's more consistent with the child. The more the consistency, the stronger the bond, and more the faith that the child has in that caregiver. So,
my son usually goes to bed by 9, but yesterday was a holiday and he was doing some art, so I just left him there. He comes back and he said, for some strange reason, I'm not feeling very safe in my room.
Wow.
Then I said, okay. I was in between my meditation and he woke me up. I said, let me sit there. I'll play something for you, maybe a chant, maybe also set the room in such a way that feels safe for you. And I told him, imagine that this is your house. This is the safest space, created in such a way that nothing is going to hurt you here. every day in this room, just imagine the best things that are happening to you. And this is something that you can create. It's just recently that he started to use this room. So he's not very familiar yet. It's just his first week. So I told him, I'll play this chant for you. Then you have your immediate protection. Then there's this little light here that you can see what is happening around you. And I'm going to wait here, not throughout the night, but maybe for the next couple of minutes until you fall asleep. But I'm sure you're going to sleep. Right. Because I didn't want to assure him that for him to depend on me, because he's not a 3-year-old. He's not a 6-year-old. Right. He's almost an adult. I can see the adult in him. Yeah. So I wanted him to take the autonomy that, yes, I can do this by myself, but the parent will keep checking on me as needed.
And that's just the perfect example of what we mean by, not swooping in to help the child, right? Not to take away the things, which is one of the common parenting mistakes that we see around all the time. Because had you swooped in and you said, no, it's okay, come sleep with me, it's going to build that layer of dependency. And I think it's such a beautiful example of what a strong connection can look like, because you're implying to him that I have faith in your ability to be able to trust this space and go to sleep on your own, but I will scaffold you. I will, hold you and give you space for as long as you need to. But here are I have an early morning class as well. So I'm going to go back to my room. So you're not like making false promises to him, and that I think is again, and I think it ties back to the earlier question that you had asked about what are some things that the parents can do. Don't lie and run away from the child. Don't tell the child, I'm going to be back, and not be back at a certain... And younger children, the younger the child, they don't understand what 5 minutes mean, 10 minutes mean, an hour means. It all means the same, or as large or as little as, one can imagine. So what we see parents hiding and saying, I'm just right there, I'm going, and then go from behind the child, because all you're doing is you are building and letting that insecurity just grow in the child. So having candid conversations, being consistent, just being present, and knowing when to step in and when to step back, like that. It's a very nuanced skill and not something that can be taught, but your child will teach you. The more you step on their boundaries, they're going to resist. And if you are a careful observer, if you have, if you have some sense of awareness about, what is it that you're overstepping on, you will immediately be able to catch it. So
it's very beautiful.
Yeah, no, it is. Thank you for sharing that.
What, according to you, are the best ways to parent a child? And what are the different parenting styles or attachment styles?
Yeah, I think it's really important to speak about attachment styles, because that sort of sets the base for who the child is going to be, right? There is secure attachment, there is insecure attachment, there is avoidant attachment, and there is disorganized attachment, right? And each one of these are coping mechanisms, right?
I mean, can you explain what each of this is?
Sure. So secure, as the name suggests, is a very is an adult who's very aware of one's own misgivings and strengths, and who's very comfortable in being able to put that across. Is a very regulated adult who's able to navigate situations without much harm to themselves or others, right? An anxious attachment style is somebody who's basically faced a lot of abandonment issues. So they're not very sure, they're not very, trusting of the environment around them. So they tend to be people pleasers. They tend to be do everything in their capacity to give, and want to hold on to every relationship at any cost. And when they see even the slightest of, to give you an example, right? Let's say it's a relationship and the partner, is basically giving a huge red flag by not returning your calls or ghosting you and things like that. A secure partner would take that as a red flag and be like, okay, so this is where, I clearly see where this person stands. So I'm not going to engage with this person anymore till it's going to be on the terms of mutual respect, and the person will be able to, and will never see it as their own fault.
Yes.
An anxious person would be either, desperately calling and be do what it takes to get that person back in their life. And this could be from a child's perspective as well. If the mother has, and I say mother because initially it is the mother that because of the nursing and all of that, the mother has that huge power over the child. And if that child is abandoned at that stage, what happens is this becomes an adult who's basically saying, I'm going to do whatever it takes to keep my mother with me. And I'm going to do, this is the unhealed part of that anxious attachment child. Then comes the dismissive, where hyper independence, right? It is basically saying, I don't need anybody. I'm going to do everything on my own. I'm capable. I'm strong. I'm going to do what it is. And I will push every relationship away in their world because they believe the only people they can trust is themselves. That would be dismissive. And disorganized is a mix between anxious and dismissive. So because there's sometimes this, there's sometimes that. So you really don't know which, and it could be because of early childhood. And all of this ties to early childhood experiences, which is why I said, and one of the, top experts in this is John Bowlby. He was one of the primary American researchers who started largely grouping people into these 4 groups because pretty much everybody falls into one part of the quadrant. And this has had huge impacts in psychological work with children because now it tells us that that's why going back to that point of like every time the child's emotional needs are not being met, there's an possibility of the child becoming more and more anxious in nature. So to avoid that, you want to be able to continuously meet and consistently meet the needs of a child to help raise a secure child. So that is with that. And going back to your original question on parenting, I would say one of my mentors, and this is a beautiful example that she gave me, was imagine you've planted, a plant in the soil and you're watering it. You're watering it, and you know that something is happening with the water, with the nutrition, with the right light and everything. You know that the roots are happening and it will take a long time for the flowers to show up. But if the same person is saying, I watered it, I'm going to pull it out and see how much have the roots grown, put it back in. I'm going to pull it back out again. I'm going to see if the roots grow, right? That kind of gardening is not going to allow for the plant to ever develop. And for all, it's going to possibly just wither and die. So this, I think, is a beautiful example of what they speak about different styles of parenting, which is basically like permissive parenting, authoritarian parenting, and authoritative parenting. These are the 3 large styles. Authoritarian is what many of us in South Asian cultures grow up with, where there's a hierarchy, there's one top person in the family, that person is swooping down on you, and that person makes all the decisions. That person makes all the decisions, and like you are like that person's the alpha in the house, right? And it's you just toe the line, basically. That's authoritarian. Permissive, on the other end, is the other end of the spectrum, where because I have been raised by an authoritarian parent, I'm going to do what it takes to allow for, I love my child so much. Authoritarian is also a lot of love. I'm doing it out of love, but I'm doing it out of love in an ironclad manner. And I'm doing it out of love in this absolutely loose manner where if the child is running on people and scratching the walls and destroying things, but it's okay, it's my child.
There are no boundaries.
Zero boundaries. It's actually child feels very unsafe in a permissive parenting style.
Because he doesn't know how much to explore.
Exactly. And when there are no limits, in life, it's not possible that there are no limits, right? Authoritative is right in the middle where it's saying, hey, I'm going to give you the space. This is the space, like here is your boundary. But the minute you step out of the boundary, I'm going to be there to shove you back in and I'm going to be there to draw those lines. Okay. So that idea of clear-cut boundaries and being responsive to your child's needs is what is authoritative. Very beautifully.
It's called authoritative.
Authoritative. Okay. Authoritarian, permissive, authoritative. Yeah.
So authoritative is a common ground.
Yes.
Very beautiful. And what is helicopter parenting?
Helicopter parenting is when a parent, completely out of love, is there I think it goes back to that earlier example that you said, where you're swooping in to this example of your son, where he wants to sleep, but he's scared and he's coming to you. Had you swooped in and you said, come, baby, you can't be, I can't let you go through this. I'm going to be there. You fall and I'm going to pad that space. I'm going to do everything to protect you. I'm not going to ever let you experience
hurt.
Any sort of hurt, any sort of disappointment, any sort of struggle in life, because I'm older, I'm more capable, and I can do this better. So let me help you. Is that very helicopter parenting style, which is very, 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 because it plays with the self-esteem of the child. It truly affects the self-esteem to a point where the child feels like I'm good for nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you don't allow the child to learn.
Yeah. And where does resilience come from? If you don't struggle, if you don't fail, if you don't try again, none of these wonderful things that the brain needs to be able to, because these are experiences that the child has to go through to be able to next time for the circuit to say, oh, okay, I went through this, let me do this better. I'm going to get better at this. You're not giving that opportunity to the child by swooping in.
Correct.
So that's helicopter parenting.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Takes so much to raise a child.
Yes, it does. But it's also such a joyful journey. It really is. I think I am blessed to be a parent and a parent to so many children. And I think that I wouldn't trade this for anything in the world. I think it's one of the most satisfying roles that one can play. And I'm saying a parent to a dog, a parent to a child, a parent to a flower, plant. Yeah, anyway.
I have 2 questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
One is, if I'm a mother that wants to pursue a career, what age would be appropriate for me to step out of the house? Right. Considering the child is a priority for me, but at the same time, I want to focus on my career.
So I think there is a little bit of privilege involved in that question. I mean, my heart goes out to all of those people that have to get out because their needs, their wants are such that they are not being able to be at home. But ideally, if the world was an ideal place, 2 years, the first 2 years of the child absolutely needs the primary caregiver's undivided attention. The first 2 years of consistent primary caregiver responses, the first 2 years of being able to meet the child at all its needs that we spoke about, the social needs, the emotional needs, the physical needs, if all of these can be consistently provided to the child, and then after 2 years, honestly, getting out of the house for at least hours where the child you don't need to be with the child is something that's perfectly okay to do, and I think is also healthy for the adult, because in today's day and age, the women are also equally, if not more, capable and should be given the same opportunities as any other adult.
That's a great perspective. How can a child who studied in a Montessori environment adjust into a traditional schooling system?
Right. Again, it comes down to consistency, and the ethos of the school, because what happens is, like we know in a Montessori classroom, a child is free to take whichever subject that he or she wants to and work with it for as long as he or she wants to. So what the child really needs practice is in test taking, in being able to answer a certain number of questions in a limited amount of time. We have a funny anecdote where we remember that the first time we did exams for our children, because they were ready to transition out, and we wanted to show them how exams would happen, and that you would be seated in a place and you would have to not talk to anybody and finish the question in that time. It's a solemn atmosphere and all of that. This child is sitting across, he's bad at Telugu, the other child is bad at Hindi, and he's like, oh, no problem, Miss Suchi. He's like, I'm good at Telugu, she's good at Hindi, we'll just exchange papers and we'll just help each other. We're like, no, that's not how exams happen, But he's like, why? He's really, bizarred out, because his question is, but we should be helping each other, right? And it's a very valid question. So in terms of transition, I think that the school should start preparing the child for exam taking, should introduce the idea of textbooks at least as homework, so that that there is that idea of going back home and doing a certain amount of work off of a prescribed textbook and things like that. And continuous conversations with the family, so that, and honestly, the transition is harder in a parent's mind than it is in a child's mind. The child easily adjusts to any kind of transition. There may be a little bit of regression, but as long as the family can support the child through that little patch, I think it's usually a very smooth one. Just consistency and being able to, and preparing the child well ahead of time, and not just throwing it suddenly onto the child.
As you speak, something came to my mind. Even in my son's school, although he's IB, he's still in grade 5, so they don't have exams. So he was talking to somebody who's not very familiar with schools that don't have a grading system. And he said, me and my classmates, whether we study that subject or don't study that subject, all of us are going to go to 6th grade. And it was not very well taken by this adult who feels like, I have to earn that grade. So how do you look at this mindset?
Yeah, I actually also would agree with this adult in the sense that I do believe that it's like consequences like everything else, right? If there has not been enough understanding, you're not doing a service to your child by constantly moving them grades up, because what you're doing is you're not filling that gap, you're not filling that hole. You would rather, but it doesn't have to be a fail, it doesn't have to be a repeat of grade. I'm saying that
without tagging them.
Without tagging them, there are gaps. How are we going to fill those gaps? It is our moral responsibility to make sure that as the child is growing, we're not leaving gaping holes, because eventually the child is going to have to suffer. So I do believe that, holding a child back when necessary, wherever necessary, as long as it's not a tag in the parent's mind, I think if the parents are open and allow the expertise of the educator and have faith, I think that should be done. And it is very common practice in many progressive pedagogies to hold a child back for a certain subject or for a certain amount of time and things like that.
Give us 3 pointers, 3 important pointers that every parent should and must focus on if they want their child to thrive in that particular school. What would be those 3 parameters?
In that school, you said, right?
Yes. In whichever school the child
goes to. Number 1 is do your research. Research as many schools as you can. But once you decide a school, show faith. I think that is the biggest, it's one thing, because for having faith in your child is, of course, a non-negotiable, but having faith in the school is also very, very important, because for anything, it's like saying, I can't ask you how your nail is growing every day. You will see the results of it as time goes along and as that adjustment with the school happens. So showing faith is the number 1. Being consistent. I cannot overemphasize that, when I say consistency, I mean follow the school rules, if you're expected to check a journal, please check the journal every day. If you're expected to show up on time, if you're expected to show up for certain things, be there. Because only when you partner with the school are you going to be able to help your child. So, I think that partnership, that idea of faith in the school, consistency, I think are the biggest takeaways for me. So, yeah.
I personally feel also my relationship with his class teacher helps me a lot.
Yeah, but there's a lot of attrition, that, no? So, so I'm saying with class teachers, every year the teachers change. And that is, unfortunately, it's like any other business that's out there, just finding I actually miss, I've had teachers from LKG to 12th who stayed with me, in that same school. Even when I was in 12th, I would go back to my LKG teacher and she was still in school.
Yes.
That doesn't exist anymore. That just doesn't exist anymore. So that is one of the realities that we're dealing with. All this AI, all this Elon Musk led kind of things has made everything so transactional that things like, workforce and ethics in workforce. Yeah.
But don't you feel the relationship with the class teacher in that particular grade will enable you to understand how the child behaves in the class?
Ideally, 100%. In fact, we ask our teachers to at least stay for the length of 3 years because it's mixed age classroom in Montessori, right? So all we ask and beg our teachers is stay for those 3 years, just so you've seen the child from point A to point B when the child leaves at the end of 3 years, at least that much. Waldorf, for example, asks for its teachers to be for an 8-year cycle at the same thing, So every pedagogy actually pushes for that. But, and the reason for that is the parent also, because the teacher is a secondary caregiver. While the parent is a primary caregiver, the teacher becomes the secondary caregiver. So it's very important for these 2 parts of the child's life to actually know, understand, and like each other. So it's actually a very, very important part. But practically, is it possible from a school's perspective? Not.
But I think from a Montessori perspective, you have a ratio of 1 teacher to 10 students, right?
Not at all. In fact, that's a big myth. Dr. Montessori actually in her writings spoke about having at least 1:30. Her point is that the more adults that they are, the more of obstructions we are actually putting in, the obstacles we are putting in the child's growth. Wow. It is a big myth. In fact, my trainer who's from America, and America has very strict things, he was like, you are lucky to be in India where there are no mandated things. He's like, you can follow the Montessori pedagogy to its truest capacities, primarily for this, because what happens is in our classroom, our 6-year-olds become mini teachers. Our 6-year-olds are the ones that the 3-year-olds are gravitating towards, and we are giving them the opportunities to practice those things. So we have a horde of assistants. It's similarly with the 6 to 12-year-olds, right? Where our 12-year-olds become natural readers. They're leading the younger ones. They're correcting notebooks. They're doing all of that. And you're robbing them of those opportunities by putting in more and more adults, because the adult needs to feel productive. The adult needs to want to do things. In fact, Dr. Montessori brutally spoke about it. She said, if it was possible, I would tie the teacher with a belt to the chair, so that every time she feels the need to go up, that belt is restraining her and she's moving a bead to you don't interrupt the work of the child. You believe that the child can do it on his or her own. So having more adults is actually counterproductive.
What is your view on having financial literacy as a subject?
Oh, it's very, very, very important. And I really wish, and this is something it's almost like serendipitous, like Anupama and I were talking about it just last week about what we can do to introduce financial literacy. It requires a certain age group, though. I believe 5th grade, 6th grade is a good time to start the basics of financial literacy, because in today's day and age, especially for girls, there is so much of a disparity among women and men in terms of financial literacy. So I strongly believe it's a subject that every school should start from middle school, 100%.
There are 3 fundamental questions that I wanted to address through this conversation. Number 1, when I meet a bunch of parents, not many parents understand the pedagogy, the syllabus, or the school, which of this is really appropriate for their own child.
Okay.
What usually happens is they're talking to their friends, they're talking to their families, or they know the founder of the school, and they feel maybe this is the right choice. Right. But how can a parent really make this choice that is suitable for their child and the child's aspirations?
Right. So the fundamental aspect in all of this is the family values, right? A school is not just about the syllabi that is, let's say, a CBSE or an ICSE. That is just literally a minuscule part of that entire picking of what the child needs, right? What we recommend for a family is that you will definitely have to see the ethos of the school. Does the ethos of the school match with your family values, right? So that is one of the key questions that I would recommend parents ask themselves. Look around, because, there are nuclear homes, there are joint families. When we say a family ethos system, it also has to match with the grandparents, if the grandparents are a key contributor to the child's life, right? Or is it going to be an uphill battle? If you're going to choose something, is it going to be an uphill battle for the child? Because at the end of the day, home is a much bigger school than actual school is. So my strong recommendation is that family value ethos is the number one thing. Ethos of the school has to match. Of course, pedagogically, there has to be some alignment. Otherwise, it's hard. The rest of it is fluff, in my opinion. Yeah. So
I'll just like to break that down a little bit. So as a parent, I might have certain aspirations for my child. Should that be relevant to my choice of school or pedagogy or syllabus? Or should I look at the child as an individual and understand maybe my child is more driven towards research. Maybe he will do well in an unstructured environment. Maybe he will do better in a child-centric environment. Or should that be taken into aspect while making this choice?
Definitely, ideally, the child's personality is number one, right? That should lead the choice. But the reason I say that with some caution is because the child is never just, is not fighting this battle by themselves, right? The child has to come back to a house. If the primary caregivers, and I say that carefully, if the primary caregivers are there around to support the child's interests and in some sense stand for the child's interest against what the rest of the family has to say, then by all means, this should be the priority, which is, leading with the child's interests. But if that's not the case and the parent doesn't have the time and it's really the rest of the family that's supporting the child, then I think a more cautious approach of seeing what aligns with the family values is what I would recommend.
I'd like you to talk a little bit about what do you mean when you say value system of the family and the ethos of the school?
Right. So, for example, and I can speak this from experience, right? Where the school can stand for, let's say, a simplistic example like time, right? The school's ethos is very strict on time. And we say by 9, everybody has to be inside school. But if the family value system is such, and not to say that one is right over the other, there is no judgment here of any sort. But if the family values are such that, it's okay for the child to wake up and it's okay to, be tardy, and to go to a school. And then what it ends up happening is that there's a battle going on between the school's ethos and the family value system. So this is as simplistic an example as it gets. From here, all the way up to grading, to say that, hey, your child actually learned a lot. I don't need results. I don't need to test your child to prove it. But I know, because as an educator, I'm seeing your child on a day-to-day basis, and I understand his understanding is very deep about the topic, while it may not necessarily, be equivalent of marking a bubble on a paper. Yeah. So, and that's what we mean by the ethos of the school system. What does the school, hold very dearly? What are the values? It's in some sense, the school is also a family, right? The school is also, is hierarchical. There is a certain structure to the school, and there are some values that the school holds very dearly. Are those in alignment with one's own personal value systems?
So, as a parent, at this point, probably I had done my research, but as a new parent, maybe 5 years ago, my understanding of a school was I paid a certain fees. I handed over my child,
right,
and I want a packaged product back home.
Right.
And when that doesn't happen, in terms of maybe the child is not compassionate enough, not empathetic enough, not understanding enough, not doing well in sports, or not coping up with the rest of the kids, because that seems to be the bar, right? You're always trying to match up to something. Then I'm disappointed, because I want the school to do everything. I'd like you to comment on that.
No, this is a pet peeve of mine, and that's why I started smiling the minute you said this, because this actually ties in very closely to what you asked earlier about the ethos of the school. So as a first-time parent, okay, you need to know, what is important to me. Are you looking at a school as a transactional system where you go drop the child and school takes care of A, B, C, while X, Y, Z is something I will handle it? And there are schools like that, right? And that suit family systems very well. So those are the kind of questions that one needs to be asking, because and like you said, for example, from where I come from, right? Like at Anthea, we do not, we make it very clear right in the beginning that it's a partnership. And as cliched as it sounds, it truly involves every stakeholder in to be equally participating in this, because that is when any sort of magic can happen with a child. Any potential blooming to its optimum can only happen when all of the stakeholders are equally vested. So understanding the ethos of the school becomes that much more important when you're choosing a school, especially as a first-time parent, right? So, you and ask as many questions like, how will the school handle if my child comes back home, bullied? What are some of the things that the school does not take care of? Sports, for example. If sports is really important to you and the school is not able to offer it to you, then it's a very crucial question to ask yourself, is it worth for me to do this?
That's a lovely answer. You did highlight that the partnership is very important, because a lot of education is also happening at home.
Absolutely.
Maybe the child is only spending 6 to 8 hours at a school, but
or fewer when they're younger. So.
Yes. So ideally, the education continues at home.
Right.
What happens when either of the parent thinks very differently?
Right.
Then how do they meet the middle path for the child?
Right. And that is a beautiful question, because that is something we harp about a lot, because it again ties back to what we initially spoke about, saying the value system of the family. If it's a nuclear family, then it's at least the two primary caregivers, are they on the same page? If it's a joint family system, because the other primary caregivers, grandparents, also become equal contributors in this. So, are they sold? Are they willing to comply, even if they don't have to be sold? But are they willing to toe the line? Are they willing to be an equal partner in this child's journey? Because alternative education can be hard, can be surprising, can be intimidating in a lot of ways, right? So that part, what you said, and to just rephrase what you just said in terms of education continuing at home, we believe education begins at home. We, continue it at school, and then it comes back, and it's a cycle at home as well, right? So, if the partners are not aligned, it is so visible in the child's journey at school, and we as educators are privy to so many such children, and it really breaks our heart, because what it does is it's sending so many mixed messages for a child, right? The child's brain is developing already. There are so many neurons just trying to make pathways. It's literally like a jungle of neurons right there, and then you're adding on top of that these environmental triggers which are actually harming the child, because the child is like, do I listen to one person, for heteronormative families, do I listen to the dad? Do I listen to the mom? Who is right? Who do I please? And the child then goes into these people pleasing and, modalities, which actually plays a huge role in. We have seen academics, and I'm talking pure academics. We've seen academics decline when a child comes from a confused household. And yeah, it is very, very sad. And I really, really hope my one appeal to everybody listening to here is, think a lot before, because schooling is an important decision. So think a lot, have a lot of conversations, debate it out. But once you've chosen, stick together and show a united front is my sincere advice. So,
you're a Montessori educator yourself. I'd like to ask you a question. How is 100-year-old pedagogy still relevant to the present time?
Right.
Because there are new systems of education, new syllabuses that have come into place, like the IB or the Cambridge, that is catering to the new AI generation. So how is the Montessori pedagogy still relevant today?
Right. And this is something we Montessorians are very cliquish about. We definitely, this is something that it's like a feather in our cap, because 100-year-old pedagogy, this lady, this absolute genius, was able to figure out things that neuroscience is still validating. While it's very akin to medical systems, where the body is the same, irrespective from time immemorial, the body is the same. It doesn't matter how the environment has changed, but the prakriti of a person remains is what it is. And I take that same example for Montessori as well, because truly, from simple things like neuroscience is now validating things like executive function, what we are labeling as executive function.
Correct.
And this is something that Dr. Montessori spoke about, saying repetition of something, using the hands to be able to improve the minds, is something that she has extensively documented 100 years ago. And that is what neuroscience is now saying. The more you work with your hands, the more neural connections are made, plasticity and pruning, and all of these things. While she did not use those exact terms, she used terms that were relevant to her times. But are now being proven true. So even today, self-learning, which is what Montessori does, things like exploration. So a child whose basic needs are met, and by needs I mean the needs of a child's needs are not just clothing, sheltering. It's not that. A child's needs, the emotional needs, oversee the physical needs. So when a child's needs are consistently met, it's a secure child who's then able to explore freely and is able to then lead his or her own learning, which is exactly what Montessori is all about. You come to a classroom, you see things at developmentally appropriate things across. The child chooses, today I feel like working with geography. I feel like working with the map of Australia. I'm going to go sit with it and work with it for as long as I want to without any interruption. Again, something that neuroscience has validated, saying that when you allow a child to concentrate for a certain length of time, the brain development clearly, there are neural pathways that light up, so, and that is something that, we do as a pedagogical principle in a classroom. So.
Fantastic. Coming to that, how many of these children are really motivated to work in an unstructured environment and to choose for themselves? Because I hear that Montessori is a very child-centric environment. Right. The teacher does not make the decisions.
That's right.
The subjects are offered and the child walks in the first period, first 40 minutes. He wants to do art or math or geography. He chooses based on where, his brain functions best at that point. But how many of these children are really able to make that choice?
So it's not just the first 40 minutes, right? It's the entire time that the child is at school. So when a child walks in, we've had children that walk in and pick up arts and have been sitting with arts for almost 2 hours. And we allow that to happen as long as it happens in reasonable time frames, right? If we are able to, as educators, see is it something that the child is choosing out of their own volition, or is it something they're doing to escape work, right? So with that discernment in mind, we actually don't interrupt the child at all. And to go back and the question again, please, for me one more time. You said,
how does a child feel motivated?
Motivated, yeah. So precisely because of the fact that we are not thrusting anything down their throat. Imagine, think of yourself as a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old even, right? You go in and then your teacher is saying, now let's all do sleeping lines. We all are practicing sleeping lines. And you've had a really bad day at home. You've woken up, you've not gotten your favorite breakfast. You're irritated. You've come home in that mood. And all you want to do is to just go curl up somewhere with a book or just lie down or just take your time to blow the steam off. But no, you're expected to all do sleeping lines when we're all going to do it together, right? So is that going to ever motivate you? Or is an environment which is going to say, hey, I see, here's the thing, see what appeals to you. And we've had children, we've had a child. And I say this very fondly because he's one of our brightest children now. And when I say bright, I mean like, the whole typically bright child, right? Like the entire year, he would come take a piece of paper and put an orange dot on it and say, my work is done. I've done my work. And as an educator, I remember calling up my mentors, in panic saying, what is going on? Like, why am I not able to motivate this child to be able to, and the answer was having implicit faith in your environment, in the fact that you have prepared it with careful consideration of all the children's needs and lo and behold, in about 6 to 7 months, the child had passively absorbed so much of what was going on. We are thinking that he's producing this paper with an orange dot and not doing anything.
So what was he doing with the orange dot?
That's it. He would just take the thing and do an orange dot and leave it and say, I'm done. He would say, that's my work. And we had to honor it. It was his work, because that's something that he's done, right? But we were panicking.
That's a difficult decision for an educator and a parent.
Yes, to have the faith, and the answer was have the faith in the fact that, look around your environment. Are you not, see what needs to be changed? So the motivation comes from careful observation of your children under your care. If an educator is nuanced to be able to see what, every child needs and to have just that many things, to not overwhelm the child, not to underwhelm the child, right? It's about that balance. Motivation is very, very intrinsic. It comes when the environment is right. It cannot happen through force or through anybody coaxing you to get motivated.
Yes. So it really comes back to ancient wisdom,
absolutely
old school thought process, not to get carried away,
right?
Rush things.
And have faith. Have faith in that innate human potential. The human mind is limitless. And it's capable of so much, right? To just show faith and know that if you, honestly, the only role the adult provides is to curate an environment that meets the needs of the child. That is it. After that, exploration, what the child does is entirely dependent on the child. So
it takes me back to how much of a responsibility as a parent, once the child comes back home, am I willing to give? Because for most parents, today's school is an escape.
Right.
For 6 to 8 hours, they're gone. So then I can focus on my work, get a few chores done. Because parenting is not easy.
It's not.
Even we are somewhere, adults, but there is an inner child within us always trying to sort ourselves out through everyday challenges. Now through this, you have TV, you have screens. Most of the parents' time goes about monitoring the screen time,
right?
Where they feel like, okay, 40 minutes is okay. Because in today's day and age, there is no way that you can say no to technology, because there's also a fear that are we stopping the child from even understanding, because this has become a part of our life.
Age appropriate though. Below 2 definitely has to be 0. I mean, that is something that every American Academy of Pediatrics, like every pediatric association that out there is telling you that below 2, it truly needs to be 0. After that, completely with you on the fact that technology has become an integral part of one's life. It needs to be, again, you'll have to look at it like a material in an environment, right? Like you have to curate it. You have to see what kind of content your child is seeing, how much, what is the age of the child. Like, you don't want to be giving 40 minutes to a 3-year-old, right?
Yes.
But 40 minutes to an hour for a 7-8-year-old is reasonable,
Yes.
right? So you'll have to also think the age of the child, the circumstances that the child is exposed to. So to me, it is like any other Montessori material. Learn how to curate it, learn how to present it to your child, and have faith that the child will be responsible with its use.
How can a parent learn these principles
Right.
from a Montessori environment and apply it at home?
To your question about where you said what when a parent outsources the school, looks at a school as an outsourcing mechanism, it really honestly just gets back to what your relationship with your child is. What is your idea of motherhood? Right. And I say motherhood not to exclude the fatherhood. What I mean to say is parenting in under that one umbrella. What does parenting mean to you? Yes, it is a lot of challenges. Yes, and you're right. We are coming to it with a lot of our own unhealed traumas as well. So it is truly a delicate tightrope walk on how much of our trauma are we passing on to our children vis-a-vis what the child's natural capacities are. Right. So given this structure, what I would say is it goes back to ancient wisdom. It goes back to commonsensical parenting, which is just to say that allow yourself to be vulnerable, with your child. It is the connection that the child needs. After the repair, the child needs to see repair. The child needs to know that the adults are capable of making mistakes. We have an honest, candid conversation about your challenges with your child, saying, hey, I know you really want to go to that park today. I know you really want to have that play date today, but here are my challenges at work. Okay. Do you think, you can skip this party with your friends, but on Saturday, I'm going to take you to, we can make a list of the things that you want to do, and I'm going to make sure that I do it. So when you stick to your end of the bargain, when you are able to show vulnerability and be true to your commitment, honor your commitment with the child develops trust. And in a trusting environment, everything changes. You will see all of the tantrums that parents talk about. It all comes back to just this one factor of trust. The child needs to trust the adult. So it's as simple as that.
I completely agree with you on this point, because anytime I try to execute control,
right,
and control due to lack of time.
Absolutely.
When I'm pressed on time,
right,
I want to control
correct,
the situation because I want it done.
Right.
Otherwise, if I have time and the emotional resources, I would sit down with the child, honor him as an individual, and negotiate with him.
Exactly.
So I will travel 50%, you travel 50%
Absolutely.
for me. And that I realized would actually eventually help him in so many of his future relationships.
This is not just you and I talking anecdotally. This is actually neurologically proven as well. So when the child is between 5 to 13, innumerable neural connections are made. It's like a jungle, right? Imagine like a big jungle. And for information to pass from here to there, it's going to have to travel that much of a path, right? But what happens, and that's the time when we're saying, put on your shoes. We need to go. We don't have the time. Let's just get going, right? We're hurrying the child. And you're not understanding that the brain cannot process it at that thing. But when the pruning happens, when enough of experiences that the child knows, when the child has had time to practice it, when the pruning happens, it becomes that much faster. So, if you are able to, and if you don't have the time, honestly, at those times, I would say just prepare the child ahead of time and just say, hey, listen, I don't have the time. I know you don't like to be rushed because we have to reach here by so-and-so. I'm going to help put you on the shoes for you. But you're doing it with respect. Do you see the difference? You're actually honoring the child's need for individuality, but saying, I know I need, and this is my need. I need to be on time. So I'm going to help you do this. So let's quickly do this together. But guess what? The next time around, I'll make sure I plan ahead and we will have that time take you through. So it's as simple as that, honestly.
So I think we've covered vulnerability, that also understanding that I could be at fault at this point because I'm running late. I didn't plan my day well. So can you allow this? And can you allow me to help you so that we can reach a common objective?
Because then you're treating the child as an individual with respect who deserves that. Would you like to be just, lifted, taken to a salon and given the haircut that you're not even sure that you're going to a haircut place, right? Like, imagine if I was to whisk you right after this and say, come, you're coming with me, and I drag you, I get you a haircut, and you have no idea. Imagine what that would make you feel like. It's very similar to that for a child.
I'd like for you to comment on, Suchi, What do these modern curriculums or syllabuses really focus on? When we look at IB, when we look at Cambridge, CBSE, ICSE have been around for a long time. Many parents are familiar with it because they have grown up studying that syllabus. But what is different when it comes to IB? What is different when it comes to Cambridge? And also when you speak about alternative educational methods, what comes under that bracket?
Sure. So CBSE, like you said, has been around. It's a national curriculum. It is more structured. It's for families that like a syllabi that they can refer to. It relies on testing heavily and things like that. So it works for some families, and that makes it easier for them to keep a tab on their child's knowledge, quote unquote. ICSE is again been here a long time, but with a more heavy impetus on English. Like families that want better literature skills and things like that tend to opt for ICSE because they have like harder English-based books in ICSE. IB is a not that recent. It's about 30 to 50-year-old syllabi. In India, it's more recent. More and more schools have opted for IB because it allows for a multidisciplinary approach. What it allows is that it allows for the child to, in some sense, own their own learning. It's very project-based. It allows for the child to, so there is no right answer in IB. As long as you're able to justify it, your answer is yours, and so it depends on, it passes the ownership on to the child a lot more than what these traditional education systems do. So there's no keywords and things like that one would ideally be watching out for. IGCSE is Cambridge. It's like a bridge between, it's also project-based, but not as much. So I would say place it somewhere in between CBSE, ICSE, and IB. IGCSE is more like the mid-path where it allows for a little bit of dabbling with projects and things like that. Gives a lot more range of subjects, allows for children to apply abroad, like IB, easier. Not that other syllabi cannot, but it allows for children to apply abroad in an easier fashion because it's more understood because it's from London. So it's also an international system which has been adapted well in India.
But they have books here.
They do have. IB doesn't. Cambridge does.
Cambridge does. Which of these systems are child-centric and which of these are teacher-centric?
I would say child-centric is definitely IB, without a doubt. Little less reliance on teachers and a little bit more of the faith being passed on to the child would be Cambridge. And heavily teacher-centric would be CBSE and ICSE for sure.
Can you comment a little bit on the alternative forms of education?
The ones that come to my mind immediately are, of course, Montessori, Waldorf, Reggio Emilia, which is one of the most recent ones, Reggio Emilia systems of education. There's also, of course, the Khan Academy, which is able to run as a physical school itself. And then there is Elon Musk's Ad Astra as well. So there are all kinds of alternative schools that were, and I believe even in Hyderabad, there are project-based schools that only do, is what I hear from parents. It's completely project-based. Mm-hmm. So there is it doesn't align to any of the curriculums. So, and that goes all the way up to 12th as well. Many of these go all the way up to 12th.
Why isn't Montessori or Waldorf method recognized as a board? So children can study until 10th or 12th and then pass out from there.
Because Montessori is a pedagogy, right? It's a bunch of pedagogical principles. So what the flexibility that it gives you is you can align yourself with any board. Like we have schools in Hyderabad that go all the way to 12th that are CBSE aligned, that are IGCSE aligned. So far, that's what I think. Either CBSE or IGCSE is what I have heard from Hyderabad. Mm. So, and in fact, at one point when we were looking at IB because it seems to be such an easy transition into what we do. IB is something that I would see. And I know that this is there in Europe and America, for sure. Montessori schools that have for their children to be able to get out with an IB diploma. So we have schools like that in Hyderabad and many such schools where the children will give the boards like everybody else, but what happens is, and that's why boards like IB and ICSE help because they give you a framework, and they say as long as you're aligning to this framework that we are providing you, and you're giving us the tests that we need, we don't care what is the mode of delivery. Like, they're not going to breathe down your neck and say this module has to be covered in this time. That's not something that these boards do. But we have schools where they use Montessori materials to teach the same concept. For example, area, volume. Instead of a textbook, we have a Montessori material to actually teach the child. And when the child has to write the final exam based on area and volume, the child has been abstracted to be able to write on pen and paper and doesn't need the materials to do that. So, it's very possible actually.
Do you feel the Montessori methods that are used to teach math are more time consuming?
I don't think so at all, actually. I don't think they're time consuming. What it allows for is it allows for natural repetition. So what traditional schools, for example, they teach you 2-digit multiplication. Okay, you are 2 years old, you're 7 years old, you can do 2-digit multiplication, and I'm going to give you a series of problems to solve it. And the way Montessori looks at it is saying, hey, you understand the concept of multiplication. Who am I to restrict you to 2 digits? You understood 2 digits? Here, play around with 3 digits. Now go ahead, play around with 5 digits. Do what it takes to get that joy of learning, right? Rather than saying, I'm going to restrict you to just doing what I believe is all your brain can take, right? It's like I am setting the potential for your development. And that's where we differ. So it's not about the time. It appears so because children are doing multiplication for so long. But what parents don't realize is that children are actually, we have 7-year-olds that are doing distributive law, commutative law, and those kinds of things which come much later in a classroom. They are just doing paper after paper. They want additional papers. We have to attach sheets to them to make a wall full of distributive law for them, because they've fallen in love with the idea of multiplication. So, and that's what we aim for. And so it appears that repetition, that need to work with it again appears like it is, but it's actually a lot more in depth.
So when you say we can apply the Montessori pedagogy to an IB syllabus, how do those two integrate?
Because IB also heavily, relies on the child's intrinsic capacity to learn. IB tells you, I'm going to teach you a concept. Now you come up with a way to show me that you've understood the concept, right? In Montessori, what we do is we have a series of materials and we tell them, here are our ways to explore. Now you go ahead. I've shown you, I've given you a bird's eye view of how this works. Now you sit with it and do where it takes you. Right? So your flight of imagination is left to your capacity, your interest. And this is, again, it ties back to the whole home and all of that, because if the environment of the child at home allows for repetition, allows for deep learning, allows for focus and concentration, it is classically replicated in a classroom. So that child is sitting with it. And so it's that, the zone of proximal development, what they call, where it's not too challenging that you give up. And it's not too underwhelming that you, both IB and Montessori allow you to be in that proximal zone of development where it's just right enough for the child, just the right amount of challenge. And that, I think, is the synergy between the two.
So I'd just like to conclude this is an easy way. You correct me if I've understood this differently. I would like to look at it as if I have parents or any family members who would like me to become maybe an IAS officer, a doctor, or join any of the civil services, maybe a CBSE or an ICSE board would be more relevant for me because there's more rote learning, because I would have to activate parts of my hippocampus to kind of mug up things, use my memory centers, then obviously take a board exam and then exhibit my potential there. Versus if I'm looking at an IB or a Cambridge, because it is accepted all over the world, it gives me a chance to travel abroad, apply for universities and higher education. At the same time, because it's just a framework, it tells me that research about volcanoes, find out where the recent eruption has happened, tell me where the belt of volcanoes are, what do you think about it? So it's encouraging me to read. And I think it also depends on the intrinsic interest of me. If I'm interested in volcanoes, I will research much more through multiple resources Versus if I'm just interested in snow-peaked mountains, maybe I'll just research on where the framework of questions are and I will stop myself there. So it's very relevant to real life situation.
And it is sad, to your initial point of where you're saying, if I want to become an IAS officer, an IPS officer, those traditional roles, does CBSE? Actually not. I don't think rote learning is for anybody. I think, in fact, the world would do a lot better with, diplomats and all of that having been exposed to this kind of learning. And you will see, some of the best people in the industry are people that have gone to areas of learning or institutions of learning which allow for this sort of the latter part that you spoke about, saying that if I'm deeply interested in something, it's going to allow me to delve deep and go, become a subject matter expert on that. Yes. And which profession will not ask for that, right? Including an IAS and an IPS officer. So, while yes, and this is the misunderstood part, people look at alternative education as dichotomies, right? They look at black or white. You either have to be total la la land, you can do what you want to do, or it's that super structured, right? And I can speak specifically for Montessori, is we don't subscribe to the dichotomy. We are unstructured in a framework. We allow for the child's own learning to develop within a framework. And that kind of system allows for every child to thrive, whether it's a rote learner, because what happens is we have children that will actually want to make number rolls all the way up to 1,000, 10,000, because they want that repetition. That repetition gives them a sense of satisfaction, and the environment doesn't stop them. Whereas we have children who are fleeting, who are basically haven't found that volcano yet, that is going to interest me, right? So when an environment, any environment, even a CBSE school, and we've had, some of my best teachers that I remember, and I went to a CBSE school, and I remember some of my best teachers are the ones that saw me, that were able to see me in that class of 30 students. They were able to make that connection with me, right? So in a CBSE classroom as well, with that structured learning, if the teacher is able to tell you that, hey, show me your understanding of what this has happened, I know that learning has reached far and wide. So I would say that every child deserves an open, inclusive curriculum. And with NEP, there's a lot of hope. Actually, CBSE is no longer going to be that structure. NEP is strongly based on all of this.
What is NEP?
NEP, National Education Policy. So NEP is now, and CBSE is now completely reframed. They have no board exams now. You can
really?
NEP has taken the best of alternative pedagogies and put them all together. So CBSE is no longer going to be what we grew up with. And if you read the actual policy of NEP, and I've only read it for up to 6 years because that was my area of relevance, there are no more mandatory sleeping lines, standing lines. They are, it's all play-based. They're allowing for manipulatives to come into classrooms. They have turned around a lot of things based on, So it's actually very encouraging.
Suchi, I'd like to ask you, what are your views on homeschooling?
I actually am a big proponent of homeschooling. I really, really wish we have... to me, it's an ideal way of schooling, because truly, and we began the whole thing, the home is the first school, right? And if it can be a natural extension and can go into academics and go into who better than the parent or the home to know the child as well as one can, right? So big proponent, but unfortunately what it requires is a lot of commitment from the primary caregivers. It requires a community. The social aspect does tend to worry a little bit, because then you're restricted to classes and those group classes that you take your child to, and the social interactions and those or family get-togethers or friends. It has to be a forced setting. It's not it's sad that in traditional schooling, children come to school for the socialization aspect, whereas in homeschooling, the large part of learning is taken care of at home if done right. Right. So, I recently watched a group of homeschoolers from Bombay, kids that were going to school aged 9, 10, 11, and chose to not and stay at home. And they are so much happier being at home, being able to be a community of homeschoolers. If we're able to get that whole cooperative setting where a bunch of homeschoolers get together and they're able to do it, and each one brings their expertise, each homeschooling adult has an expertise, then nothing like it. I think it's the most ideal form of schooling.
Also, I think getting them the right mentors.
Yeah, because one can't provide everything.
Being very open to helping each other rather than making it competitive.
And that's what happens naturally in a homeschooling setting, is what I'm saying. Like competition is almost non-existent because each one's interests are so varied. And they are just looking at, hey, you know what, I'm not interested in this, but you are. Here's the person that you can, deal with, right? So it's a very natural outcome of, whereas what our grades and all of this does is it pushes our children in the wrong direction.
They want to be seen. They want to be appreciated.
And pushes them for external validation all the time. What are the grades at the end of the day? If you are not... So there was a very interesting research from Stanford, if I'm right, where they did this thing of they tested a bunch of school children and they all tested right? But when they were given an alternative test on the same questions, but more in depth, all of these children that were stellar and I wouldn't say all, there was statistically, there's a certain number, and it was overwhelmingly so that the children who did so well on the first test, where they knew what they had to be tested for, versus the second test on the exact same topics where it was just in depth and the questions were different from things, they failed miserably. So, which showed the researchers that true learning hadn't happened, that most children are studying to get the grade, to what do I need to do to get the grade. It's never what do I need to do to learn the subject. It's a very different perspective. Are you learning for learning or are you learning for marks? So,
but when you look at it from a child's perspective, a school offers a sense of social gathering, sports, you come together. There's so much fun. Back in the day when we were in school, probably school almost felt like I'm really looking forward to summer holidays. But again, that's where you made friends.
Right.
That's where you discovered yourself.
Right.
So do children that are homeschooled miss out on that opportunity?
And that's why I brought that, point about socialization. If the homeschoolers can form a cooperative society of some sort, where there's just enough socialization that can happen, and these meetups are more regular and more scheduled, I think it's the best of both worlds. But homeschooling in a little cocoon just with the parents, definitely the socialization takes a big hit. You will see awkward people. You will see children that have not developed the necessary decorum or social skills required to belong to a larger group, right? So all of those things definitely lack if it's a very strict homeschooling environment. But if the homeschool is more like a bunch of collaborators together, and like you rightly said, bringing the mentors in, so everything is taken care of. The socialization aspect, the need for... Actually, what homeschooling does is I believe that it's pushes the child to be intrinsically motivated rather than extrinsically motivated, right? And that's a huge thing that schools are lacking big time in, because we are making children more and more reliant on rewards. So a good grade is a reward, right? A poor grade is a punishment, right? And that becomes a very binary relationship with life, which is not what we want in children. We want children to have a growth mindset. So, and there was this fantastic research which spoke about children that got praised, got heavily praised, got heavily, graded highly, validated by the adult, basically would do lesser, harder tasks. They would do tasks that were, easier and easier and easier, just so that they got that praise. And in fact, children that were not praised as much or were not, extrinsically motivated as much, actually, went for the tougher problems, went to, for the joy of learning, actually did better in life.
They don't mind
eventually.
Failing. There's no fear of failure.
Yes, there is no fear of failure. There is, you do, and if you fail, there's this acceptance. This is vulnerability around failure. You almost embrace it and say, okay, what can I do to do better next time? So
today I see a lot of kids, they don't like to lose in a game.
Yep.
They can't accept failure. Why do you think that happens?
Sadly, it all comes back to the house, because if the house, we have seen birthday parties in our where children are taking part, and the parents behind are saying, "Go faster, do it, do what it takes, push it. You're gonna," and it's a party for children by the children. And if that idea of competition is being the agenda of competition is being pushed so heavily from the house, the child comes in with that mindset of, I need to outdo everybody else. And if I don't, I'm a loser. That is the self-message that the child is getting.
Yes.
So which is why, and what is the school doing? Promoting more things like that, right? Which is why, alternative pedagogies like IB and all of that, where there is a a grading system of sorts, where because you're comparing yourself only to yourself. You're not comparing yourself to another person, right? Imagine, and one anecdote that we always share with parents is that if you have two children in the house who are exactly the same age, do you buy the same kind of clothes for them? Do you buy the same size of shoe for them? Do you buy the same kind of accessories for them? When you're able to differentiate so much between two children same age, right? Height may be different, weight may be different, all of that. How come in education you want it all in a box, like, all of it compartmentalized? So, and I think competition largely stems from the house. So if the home environment allows for the child to say, hey, it's okay, it's the process that matters, it's not the product, I think competition will be eliminated.
But do you think words just matter there? I hear most parents saying that the process matters and not the result. But I feel children are a lot more intelligent. They look at the actions of the parents.
Absolutely.
And what you're talking about takes a lot of conscious parenting, a lot of inner work on both the primary caregivers.
It's a very tangible sensation, right? When I say tangible, what I mean to say is it's an intangible emotion, but is felt very strongly by the child. Right? The emotion of what you're saying, like, I can just say on the face, but my that look of disappointment. I don't know if you saw the movie Adolescence, that the father says, like, he would just turn away. He would just turn away. And that one act is enough for the child to know that he was not good enough, that he didn't stand up in the eyes of the father. He didn't yell, he didn't shout, he didn't do any of those things. But that act was enough and we don't know. And not every child is the same. Some children internalize it more. Some children are able to
let it go.
Right? And that, I think, is really important for a family to understand. And like you said, the two primary caregivers to be on the same platform. If the primary caregivers are different, where one is pushing, and the other one's more accepting, you never know which side the child takes. Just to please a parent, they will be typically on the parent that's more aggressive, that's more forthcoming, that's more type A, for the lack of better. Children tend to heavily, because it's like it's human nature, right? It's dogs, it's all of us. Like the alpha is strongly, has that presence felt. So
very interesting and very scary.
It is very scary, which is why the primary caregiver that is more subtle, right, has a larger influence, or can have a larger influence, if he or she can provide that space haven, trust, of comfort, of saying that I am giving you the space. While yes, he or she wants this from you, I am telling you, and I mean it, and I'm going to stand up for you, and I'm going to show it that it does not matter even if you didn't do well. When that happens, the balance is...
I feel that also gives the child a fair advantage of pushing himself, allowing him to succeed and have the motivation. At the same time, to understand failure and say it's fine.
Have the cushion.
Yes.
Again, saying that, I'm okay, whichever way I am, I tried. And that's what that matters.
Yeah.
So I think that message needs to be loud and clear for the child. If every household... See, it's not possible to have a ubiquitous home where everybody is the same.
Correct.
It's not good for the child either. Yes. The child should see multiple personalities, should see perspectives, and that's why we are big fans of joint families, because it mimics the world. Tomorrow, when your child goes out to the world, they're not going to see the same kind of people, right? So when you're preparing them in these micro environments for those disappointments, for those hurts, what you're doing is actually you're giving your child the advantage of,
building resilience.
Resilience, absolutely, growth. Yeah. So
that's so beautiful and deep. Thank you so much for that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What is your opinion on Elon Musk's Ad Astra School? Knowing that he is a billionaire, wherever he invests, he does reap its returns. We also look at him as a pioneer in many fields. So why not education? And also he does highlight that the future of children wanting to learn new languages may not be required, because you have AI which will have it ready for you. What is your opinion on that?
There are definitely aspects of his schooling that I do appreciate, especially when it comes to critical thinking, problem solving. Those are big highlights,
When you say critical thinking, what does it mean?
So they are presented real life problems, right? Like they're given a problem, like we just spoke about a few minutes ago about, hey, Mahakumbh happened, Ganges was polluted. What can we do to make that clean, right? It's a very recent,
Yes.
It's something that's presented. And when the children are brought together with the right mentor, so chemists are brought in, policy experts are brought in, right? So that school, for that one project, whichever mentor is needed is brought in for the child to be able to work with, which is fantastic, which is almost privileged, which I think is something that's necessary for every child should be allowed access to such kind of education. But I heavily disagree with certain aspects of a school, which is very transactional in nature. Right? It's about like, hey, I'm educating my child so that I can make this superhuman, intelligent individual that's going to, do these fantastic inventions and discoveries and build it a company and become a billionaire, right? Fundamentally, I have a big issue with that because that is what has made the world the way it is today. That's why we are facing climate challenges. We're facing all of these things with this very transactional relationship that we have with the ecosystem. And I have a huge problem with that. And the other thing is his whole idea on language is absolutely something that neuroscience throws down, because it's what neuroscience is telling you is that the more languages that the child is exposed to, neurons are fired in various parts of the brain, which allows for more plasticity, which in turn leads to more executive functioning, right? Like the prefrontal cortex developing in a much better fashion. You cannot take away the holistic benefits of what any subject offers to a child based on your understanding of like, so what if AI is going to take it over, right? I may not need to know, but learning a language is a skill, is allowing me. It's similar to saying cursive versus print, right? Or typing. Each one, typing fires neurons in a different part of the brain. Cursive does a different part of the brain. It's like akin to languages, just in writing, right? And the more you learn, the more you're giving the brain to develop. So I don't agree with that at all. So
something you said evoked a thought, something that I had heard a few years ago, where Sadhguru had said, if you have so much money and if you have so many resources and you have people working for you, why would you want to go to Mars? You might as well repair the existing planet.
Absolutely. And we have so much work going on here. And humans have been in a 24-hour clock. We've been here 17 seconds. Like that is how minimalistically we've been here. Yes. So we're not ready for all the changes that we think, human brain is very much has just barely evolved from the hunter-gatherer. So we have a long way to go before. Yeah.
And how do you view these young children who are taking to entrepreneurial projects and participating? Do you see that really nurtures them?
So as long as it's not forced.
Okay.
If it's the entrepreneurial project has come about by one's own curiosity of something that they were doing, then it nurtures into who the child eventually becomes. It takes the child into becoming, his own capacities, right? Whereas I see a lot of schools these days, bringing in these, again, to please the parent, right? To be able to tick off this thing saying we've had this person.
Because they have business families. Yes. Eventually, they want the children to take it on and have this education.
Correct. But if all successful businesses, if you go back and look at it, has been the child's own volition, something that the child has come up with as an adult, right? It's their brain project, right? Yes. Or taking over the family businesses. Now, the question is it out of the child's choice, or is it something that's just
the parents' aspiration?
Aspiration. That's the thing. It's that balance between those two.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Sushi, for this lovely conversation.
It's been pleasure,
so
Shruti.
Insightful. I've learned so much. I hope this conversation will add value to so many more adults and parents out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shruti. It's been a pleasure. And honestly, it's been such a seamless conversation with you, because I think you're very very astute, in terms of being able to take the conversation to what is the burning need among, your community. So I really, thank you for that. And it's been wonderful sitting across.
Thank you. Thank you so much for watching this episode till the end. We as a team put in many hours of work to curate each episode. If you like our content, you can support us by subscribing to our channel and hitting the bell icon. And we promise to get better and bigger together.